the Big Star story is often described as a tragic one, and there's obvious reasons for that. But there were tragedies happening while you were making the film. Would you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people passed away, and that was just kind of happening as we went along. We spoke with Alex in 2010 or 2009, and he, was typical Alex, was kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that, and was kind of like, okay. And we kind of had this idea it was going to be about fandom, if he wasn't going to be involved. And then we were going down to South by Southwest to film the concert. We were actually going to have to film around the concert because there was so much that he wasn't going to allow us to shoot. And then he passed away right before I was going to get on a flight. And then that, as you saw, a whole bunch of artists got together very spontaneously, and there were a lot of tribute concerts afterwards, but that one was amazing because people were truly affected. They were all assembled. I don't know if y'all are familiar with South by Southwest music festival in America. It's really huge. And so basically everyone in the music industry was there when it was announced that he'd passed away. And it was truly, that section, in fact, most of these sections are a lot longer, but that one was much longer, and it was all about how that came together in a very organic way. So Alex passed away, and Andy soon after, and you saw in memoriam we had Carol Manning. A big part of the film for us was to show all these different characters who were invested in this dream, this rock and roll dream. And you got to know Carol. She, loved these Beatles records and wanted to make records that looked as good as Beatles records. And she passed away right after we interviewed her. And Steve Ray was a promotions guy. And it's all about everyone loving that idea of like making it big in rock and roll. And these people were all just as much a part of that. In fact, maybe more invested. I mean, the big star guys played and boozed and had fun, and a lot of these people were working late nights trying to make this happen. So that's part of the tragedy for sure. Yeah, and there's of course redemption. I mean, we're all here now, and this music has lived on. So
sure, and it'll live on partly because you're telling the story again. You're revisiting and going back to it again. For the other one of the other cliches is a bit about Big Star is they were never as big as they should have been, and notoriously there isn't so much footage around about the. So when you were approaching the film to begin with, it's easy to see why you were drawn to this story. I mean, we were all kind of fascinated with the band and how they made those records and why they did that. And I think you tell the story brilliantly. But how did you approach it, knowing that there were people absent from the stories, but also so little material to deal with?
Yeah, we were well aware. I mean, that was a challenge that we were all aware of. So many rock documentaries are usually about one individual person, and you follow that person around and you learn about the idiosyncrasies and their tragedies and failings and their successes. And this was a group that started as 4 and was 3 and 2 and 1. And we had 20 minutes of 16mm footage to work with, and we had reams of photos, which was a real boon to the production. But that's where we try to fill in with other characters, and we just started to realize like this is a bigger story. It's about the inclusive dream of like making something happen. There were a lot of colorful characters in Memphis, and we decided to take these tangents and follow them as far as we could. And I like those crooked paths to telling a story. I actually am very long-winded when I tell stories. I'm kind of famous for that, and I think that's kind of obvious in the film. We would kind of just jump off, and if Mary Lindsay was kind of blowing our minds and making us laugh, we just kind of go with her for a while. And I for a while I felt like this is a problem of mine, but I really do feel like it enriches the story. We got a lot of criticism for not being a band chronology, and I feel like it's something else. And I don't know what, but it's just more of an essay about how music is made, what's behind the making of music, that its personalities and its environments, and there's a whole lot of ways of understanding where music comes from. And the Big Star records are very much a product of all of that. We could have just dwelled on the fact that they didn't make it, and that's maybe why the music was somewhat dismal at times. But I think also a big part of it for us is we were infatuated with the rich culture of Memphis, and it wasn't lost on us that rock and roll was basically invented in Memphis. So we did our best to sort of dig as deeply as we could to sort of make those connections as well.
It'd be a shame not to get John to say something while you're here. Would you talk a bit about revisiting, being a part of this film and revisiting that time?
Well, for better or for worse, you know, I'm probably more than 4 decades into this thing, from first meeting Chris Bell and Jody and Andy and Alex during his Box Tops days, all in the 60s. And so it has been an interesting experience. I think it's probably not too good to dwell entirely on. I mean, certainly there's a tragic aspect in this thing, but I don't dwell entirely on that because, you know, this has enjoyed a surprising amount of recognition and ongoing success. I mean, it's not mega bucks, you know, mega billion-dollar ongoing success, but it's so gratifying to me to see this music that I had a very small part in dealing with, because all I was the recording engineer and the mix engineer and the guy that was supposed to be running the little record company. Okay, yeah, that's all. So if anything went wrong, you could blame it on me. All right, you know, to see the fact that this band has got fans that are in their young teens now, and these kids will come up to me and they'll know more about what I did in the 70s than I know about what I did in the 70s. So it's a pretty amazing story, and every time you think it's over with, then, you know, you turn around and the next thing turns up. And it's not anything that you tried to make happen by design or to try to engineer or commercially push. It's just some spontaneous event that takes place, like getting a phone call 4.5 years ago or so.
More like
6? Well, time flies when you're having fun. That from somebody that says, "Oh, I think we'd like to make a Big Star documentary." Yeah, okay, sounds like a pretty good idea.
I'll actually say that I had a friend named Yancey talking about this idea about we're going to start this website where you can like raise money for your projects, and he kept talking, you're a filmmaker, this is going to be great for you. And it's like, I don't really understand how that works. And that ended up being Kickstarter, and you know, he called me up right when that website started, and I said, perfect. And so, yeah, we did Kickstarter twice actually. In the first one, we wanted $8,000, and we made that in about 13 hours because it was brand new.
All not true what you just said.
Okay, go ahead.
Our goal was $6,000, which was incredibly naive and low, and it should have been a lot higher considering what we needed. But we set it at $6,000, just like, let's see what happens. And we made that, in 24 hours, and then we went on to make over $14,000. Did a second Kickstarter in June. I believe there might be some Kickstarter backers here tonight.
Hey.
Hell yeah. Anyway, so we did another Kickstarter, and it was another amazing, wonderful success, and it really helped us get over the finish line. And I've met many of our Kickstarter backers even since we wrapped, and they're all incredibly generous and lovely people, and Kickstarter is amazing. Yay!
I don't know if it came across as much in the film. We had more stuff that didn't make it into the film about how John and his comrades, these guys were really into all things British, and the British invasion was so huge in Memphis because you guys were the only ones. Actually, this is, John, you should tell them about, this is a really great story about how you and John, the first Beatle records that you guys brought to.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me try to answer the question as directly as I can. And, you know, the best answer is I don't know, other than the fact that people in the UK are more musically discerning than people in America. Now I'll be stopped at the immigration when I go back, and that'll be the end of that. But you know, I think it had something to do with the fact that may have had something to do with the fact that Chris spent a good deal of time here, and he was talking not just to people in record companies, but he was talking to a lot of people who were in the press here, and that was, you know, after the Big Star records looked like they were kind of dead ducks. And, you know, somebody at EMI got the idea in their head that it would be worthwhile to put that double vinyl out. And I think the reason they did is they twigged onto the fact that people over here were, if they could find an original vinyl, were paying the equivalent of $75 each for them. They said, well, we could probably sell some of these things. But the Danielle story that she wants me to tell, I'll try to compress it a little bit. In the early 60s, John King, whom you saw in the film, who's the funniest guy in there, I think, I, among other things, we were programming a radio station because we were tremendously interested in radio. And as a result, we got all of the promotional copies from the various labels. And as many of you probably already know, Capitol initially would not issue the Beatle records in the United States. And they came out on various odd labels at the very beginning.
R&B labels.
Well, one of them was VJ, an R&B label.
Like Jimmy Reed's label. So they got like a Jimmy Reed record from VJ, and after that there was a Beatle record mixing with the Jimmy Reed record.
And so in comes this record on VJ, and we look at it, and it says The Beatles. I said, that doesn't sound like a VJ artist. And so, you know, we put the thing on, and we're just blown away, but we have no idea what it is. There's nothing that accompanies it that says where it came from or anything. We can presume by the vocals that it came from England. And so we said, we've got to find out something about this. And we reasoned, well, there must be some magazine we can get from England. And we researched that a little bit. And you got to remember, this is the pre-internet age, so you had to work for it, okay? You couldn't just Google it, all right? And so we figured out that was NME, and we got an airmail subscription to NME coming to Memphis. And then as soon as we had that, this whole world of groups that we never knew existed opened up, and we immediately found a mail-order record store and just kind of sent them some money and put in standing orders for certain artists to ship so that we would have the British releases sometimes months before they would come out in the United States. So those are some of the kind of silly links that we would go to get that done.
And I'll add that was a black radio station. They were about 17 years old, programming and working on a black radio station.
Well, it was ostensibly a black format radio station, but we put a rather broad range of genres into the playlist just so that we could have a little fun. And you know what? Nobody minded. You know, it was eclectic as it could be, but it worked.